You know that specific silence that happens right before a car crash? The moment when the tires lose traction, the screech hasn't started yet, and physics just takes the wheel? That's what the air conditioning sounded like in Jason's office. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind of gray, lifeless New York Friday that makes you question every life choice that didn't involve moving to a goat farm in Vermont. I was sitting across from Jason, a 30-something CEO who wore sneakers that cost more than my first car and possessed a smile that didn't quite reach his dead, shark-like eyes. He was leaning back in his Herman Miller Aeron chair, a chair he didn't know how to adjust properly, so he always looked like a toddler trapped in a spacecraft, and tapping a Mont Blanc pen against his teeth. Click, 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 the sound of a time bomb that didn't know it was already ticking. Marjorie, he started, using that tone reserved for euthanizing family pets or explaining cryptocurrency to the elderly. You know, we're pivoting. We're moving toward a leaner, more agile methodology. We're trimming the fat to let the muscle breathe. I stared at him. I've been in this game long enough to know when I'm being hustled. If you enjoy stories about corporate sociopaths getting served a cold plate of karma, do me a favor and hit subscribe, maybe drop a like. It helps keeps the lights on while I navigate this absolute circus. Anyway, back to the execution. The board and I, well, mostly I because I'm steering this ship, we've been looking at the equity pool, Jason continued, his eyes darting to the ficus plant in the corner because he couldn't hold my gaze. And frankly, the legacy options. The ones my dad handed out like candy back in the day, they're clogging the cap table. They're dead weight, Marge, and we're a family here. Families make sacrifices for the greater good. Family, I repeated. The word tasted like battery acid. Exactly, he beamed, thinking he'd landed the plane. So we're restructuring. Your stock options, the advisory ones, they're being canceled, effective immediately. We're issuing new grants to the engineering team. The guys actually building the future, you know? But hey, we're keeping you on salary for the transition period. We're not monsters. He pushed a document toward me. It was a single page. Notice of equity forfeiture. It was printed on heavy bond paper, meant to look official, meant to look final. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at Jason. He was sweating, just a little, right along the hairline where his hair plugs were fighting a losing battle against genetics. He expected me to cry, or scream, or throw the artisanal coaster sitting on his reclaimed wood desk. He was braced for the hysterical older woman routine. I gave you the best years of my life speech. He didn't know who I was. He saw Marjorie, the governance lady. The woman who sat in the back of meetings taking notes. The woman who quietly reminded people about compliance training and updated the employee handbook. He saw a fixture, like the water cooler or the printer that always jammed on tray 2. He didn't see the architect. I didn't pick up the pen. I didn't touch the paper. I just folded my hands in my lap, placing one thumb over the other, pressing down until the nail turned white. Is that all, Jason? I asked. My voice was steady, flat, the audio equivalent of a heart monitor line. He blinked, confused by the lack of drama. Yeah, I mean HR will send you the updated comp package, minus the equity. But Marge, really, thank you for being understanding. It's just business. Just business, I echoed. I stood up. My knees popped, a sound that seemed deafening in the glass box. I smoothed the skirt of my charcoal suit, a suit I bought 10 years ago when his father, Richard, begged me to come save his chaotic little startup from an SEC audit. I looked around the office. I looked at the whiteboard covered in buzzwords like synergy, disruption, and hypergrowth. I looked at the photo of Jason on a yacht, holding a magnum of champagne, looking like the poster child for unearned confidence. I'll get back to work then, I said. I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I closed it softly with a click that sounded like a lock engaging. As I walked back to my desk, a small cubicle tucked away near the server room, far from the open-plan collaboration zones where the 20-somethings threw frisbees and drank kombucha, I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't fear. It was the cold, metallic taste of absolute clarity. Jason thought he had just cut off a withered limb. He thought he had cleared the capitalization table for his big, shiny acquisition. He thought he was the smartest man in the room because he spoke the loudest and used the most acronyms. He had no idea that he had just tried to evict the landlord. I sat down at my desk. I unlocked my computer. I opened a folder labeled Archive Do Not Delete, nested inside 3 other folders labeled TAX Receipts 2018. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to sue, not yet. I was going to wait, because Jason had forgotten the first rule of corporate governance. Read the bylaws, read the amendments. Read the fine print his father signed when the company was 3 days away from bankruptcy and couldn't make payroll. He wanted to play family? Fine, we could play family. We could play the part where the matriarch reminds the spoiled children exactly who owns the house. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my glasses. The cursor blinked. Let the games begin, I thought. And for the first time in years, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a wolf watching a sheep lock itself inside the slaughterhouse. Understand why Jason's little power play was roughly as intelligent as sticking a fork into a toaster while standing in a bathtub? You have to go back. Back before the polished concrete floors and the espresso machines that cost more than a Honda Civic. Back to when this company was 5 people in a sublet basement in Queens that smelled like mildew and desperation. It was 12 years ago. Richard, the founder, Jason's dad, called me at 3 o'clock a.m. I was working at a mid-tier firm then, billing hours and dying slowly inside, one document review at a time. Marjorie, Richard had rasped, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. I'm done. The SEC is sniffing around the series around. The investors are pulling term sheets. I can't pay the lawyers. I can't pay you. I can't pay anyone. I should have hung up. I should have gone back to sleep and let Richard's dream die the death it probably deserved. But Richard, he had this chaotic, magnetic energy. He was a mess, but he was a brilliant mess. I'm coming over, I said. When I got there, the office looked like a crime scene where the murder weapon was bureaucracy. Papers everywhere, unopened notices from the IRS. Richard was sitting on the floor, surrounded by empty takeout containers, looking like a man who had stared into the abyss and the abyss had handed him a tax bill. And there was Jason. He was 22 then, an intern. He was sitting in the corner playing Angry Birds on his phone, wearing oversized headphones, completely oblivious to the fact that his inheritance was currently swirling down the drain. He looked up at me, gave a vague nod, and went back to flinging digital birds at digital pigs. That was the dynamic. Richard panicked. Jason ignored, and I fixed. For 6 months, I didn't sleep. I lived on vending machine coffee and sheer spite. I rebuilt their corporate structure from the ground up. I standardized the contracts. I fought the auditors. I renegotiated debt with creditors who threatened to break kneecaps. I was the janitor of their legal mess, scrubbing the grime off the ledger until it shined. When the dust settled, the company was saved, but there was no money, literally zero liquidity. Richard sat me down on a folding chair. Marjorie, I can't pay your invoices. I have nothing. I know, Richard, I said. I was exhausted. My hair was a mess. I was wearing the same blouse I'd had on for 2 days. But I can give you this, he said. He slid a document across the table. It was a convertible advisory agreement. A weird Frankenstein's monster of a contract. Its shares, Richard explained, his eyes bloodshot. Advisory shares, Class B. But here's the kicker. I'm putting in a clause, a loyalty clause. If the company fails to pay dividends for 24 consecutive months, or if the board fails to meet for a fiscal year, these shares convert. Convert to what? I asked, squinting at the legalese. Voting stock, Richard whispered. Supervoting stock, 10-1 ratio. It's a poison pill, Marjorie. If I ever lose control or if the vultures come circling and stop paying us, this kicks in, you become the failsafe. I looked at Jason in the corner, still useless, still playing games. Then I looked at Richard. He was trusting me to be the keeper of the keys. Why me? I asked. Because you're the only one who actually reads the paperwork, Richard said. I signed it. He signed it. We notarized it right there with a stamp I kept in my purse. I filed it away. Not in the main digital repository. Richard was paranoid about hackers then, but in the physical Iron Mountain archives and a personal copy in my fireproof safe at home. Years passed. The company grew. Richard got old and tired. He stepped back into a chairman emeritus role, which basically meant he played golf and pretended not to notice his son turning the company into a tech bro frat house. Jason took over as CEO. Jason, who never read anything longer than a tweet. Jason, who treated me like the office furniture. Jason, who saw governance specialist on my door and assumed it meant glorified secretary. He didn't know about the clause. Why would he? He never dug into the pre-Series B historic filings. He only cared about the shiny new valuation metrics, but the clock had been ticking. Condition 1, unpaid dividends. The company hadn't paid a dividend, ever. They reinvested everything into growth hacking and Jason's expense account. That was 12 years of non-payment. Check. Condition 2, board inactivity. Jason hated board meetings. He thought they were stifling innovation. He had replaced formal board meetings with strategy retreats in Chalum and Aspen. Legally, those didn't count. There hadn't been a quorum-certified, minutes-recorded board meeting in 3 years. Check. The conversion had happened silently, automatically, 3 years ago. According to the piece of paper sitting in my safe, the paper yellowing slightly with age, the paper stained with a single drop of coffee from a night in 2012. I didn't just have stock options. I held 52.4% of the voting power of the entire company. And Jason, he was walking around strutting like a rooster, unaware that the fox was already sleeping in the henhouse, holding the deed to the farm. The fog of loyalty had cleared a long time ago for me. Now, all I saw were targets. Invisibility is a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. It's like erosion. First, they stop inviting you to the strategy lunches. Then, you fall off the email threads for the high-level projects. Then, they move your desk. 6 months before Jason called me into his office to cancel my options, they moved me. I used to be next to the executive suite, strategic location. I could hear the hum of decisions being made. Then, one Monday morning, I came in to find my boxes packed. We're creating a wellness zone for the developers, the office manager. A 22-year-old named Kaylee who communicated primarily in emojis told me. So we moved you to the annex. It's quieter, better for whatever it is you do. The annex was a glorified storage closet near the server racks. It was cold. It hummed with the sound of fans cooling terabytes of data. It was where they put things they didn't want to look at: broken chairs, outdated promotional banners, and me. I became a ghost. I would walk down the hallway to get coffee. The good coffee machine was in the main kitchen, but I was unofficially banished to the Keurig in the basement, and people would look right through me. New hires didn't even know my name. One afternoon, a guy named Chad, because of course his name was Chad, stopped me near the elevator. He was wearing a vest over a t-shirt and holding a skateboard. He was the new VP of brand evangelism. "Hey," he said, snapping his fingers. "You're in HR, right? The toilet on the fourth floor is clogged. Someone tried to flush a salad." I stared at him. I was wearing a silk blouse and holding a binder containing the intricate details of our Delaware tax nexus. "I'm in governance, Chad," I said, my voice ice. Right, governance, HR, operations, same thing," he laughed, already looking at his phone. "Just get a plunger, yeah? It smells like failure in there." He walked away. I didn't get a plunger. I went back to my desk and added his name to my mental list. Chad, VP of Brand Evangelism, vest holder, future unemployable person. But the invisibility had a perk. When people think you're furniture, they talk in front of you. They leave things on the printer. They forget you have access to the shared drives because they assume you don't know how to use a computer. That's how I saw the numbers. Jason was ramping up for the sale, the big exit. Rumors were flying about a $400 million acquisition by a massive conglomerate, Omnicorp, not their real name, but close enough. To get that valuation, our EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, needed to look stellar. But it wasn't stellar. It was mediocre, so Jason was getting creative. I watched the files update in real time on the server. I saw the adjusted EBITDA spreadsheets. They were moving operational expenses into capital expenditures to artificially inflate profit. They were counting projected revenue as recognized revenue. It was classic, sloppy fraud. The kind of stuff that works for a quarter until the auditors actually open the hood. I sat in my cold corner by the servers, wrapped in a pashmina scarf, watching the digital trail of lies grow. "You're getting sloppy, Jason," I whispered to the screen. He was cutting corners on compliance. He was ignoring GDPR regulations. He was skipping the board approvals for major spending, approvals that technically needed my signature, though he thought he didn't need anyone's permission. Every day I saved a copy, every altered invoice, every sketchy email thread where he told the CFO to make the numbers work or I'll find someone who can. The cost of my invisibility was high. My pride was bruised. My professional identity was erased. I was the crazy lady in the basement to these people. But the return on investment, it was going to be astronomical. While they were playing ping pong and drinking nitro brew coffee upstairs, planning how to spend their millions, I was building a dossier. I was constructing a coffin, nail by nail, document by document. They thought I was obsolete. They didn't realize that in a company built on smoke and mirrors, the person who holds the flashlight is the most dangerous person in the world. I checked the time. 5:30 p.m. The office was getting loud, beer o'clock on Fridays. I could hear the music thumping through the floorboards. I packed my bag. I took my hard drive. I walked out past the reception desk. Kaylee waved without looking up. "Have a good weekend," she chirped. "I will," I said, and I meant it, because this weekend I was going to open the safe. My apartment on the Upper West Side is the antithesis of the startup office. It is quiet. It smells like beeswax and old paper. There are no beanbag chairs. There is no neon signage encouraging me to hustle harder. There is just order. That Friday night, after Jason had fired me from the equity pool, I didn't drink wine. I didn't cry into a pint of Ben& Jerry's. I made a pot of very strong black tea, put on my reading glasses, knelt before the floor safe in my closet. The dial spun with a heavy, satisfying click. Left to 32, right to 18, left to 04. The door swung open. Inside, stacked neatly next to my birth certificate and my grandmother's jewelry, was the file. The file. I carried it to my dining room table, spreading the documents out under the warm glow of the chandelier. It was like visiting old friends. Friends who were armed and dangerous. I bypassed the standard incorporation papers and went straight for the amended and restated shareholders agreement, dated 12 years ago. The paper was slightly yellowed. Richard's signature was a frantic scrawl in blue ink. My signature was small, precise, in black. I turned to page 14. Clause 7.2. I ran my finger over the text, reciting it like a prayer I had memorized a decade ago. In the event that the company fails to declare and pay dividends on any class of stock for a period of 24 consecutive months. Or, Roman 2, the board of directors fails to convene a quorum-certified meeting for a period of 12 consecutive months. The advisory Class B shares held by the advisor Marjorie X shall automatically, and without further action by the board, convert into Class A supervoting shares at a ratio of 10:1. I grabbed a calculator. I didn't need it, but I wanted the satisfaction of the buttons clicking. Total outstanding shares, 10 million. Jason held 4,040%. Investors held 4,040%. Employee pool, the one Jason was trying to gut, 1,010%. My original grant, 1,010%. But the math changed when Clause 7.2 kicked in. My 1 million shares didn't just stay as 1 million. They carried the voting weight of 10 million. The total voting pool wasn't 10 million anymore. It was roughly 20 million votes, and I held 10 million of them. 10 million out of 19 million effective votes, 52.6%. I sat back in my chair, the tea cooling in the mug. Jason thought he had canceled my options. You can't cancel stock that has already vested, converted, and legally metamorphosed into a controlling interest. He could stop issuing future grants. He could fire me as an employee, but he couldn't fire me as the majority shareholder, not without a shareholder vote. And he couldn't win a shareholder vote because I was the vote. I looked at the date on the conversion clause. The trigger date was 3 years ago. For 3 years, I had been the silent owner of the company. I had let Jason play CEO. I had let him buy his Herman Miller chair. I had let him hire Chad the skateboarder. I had let him think he was a god. Why? Because loyalty is a hard habit to break. Because Richard was my friend and Jason was his son, and I kept hoping, foolishly, that Jason would grow up, that he would learn, that he would eventually respect the machinery that kept his engine running. But today he tried to erase me. He tried to steal the equity I had earned by bleeding for this company when he was still in diapers. He broke the social contract, so I was going to enforce the legal one. I pulled out a fresh legal pad. I picked up my pen. I started drafting, not a resignation letter. I was drafting a motion to intervene. I needed to time this perfectly. If I revealed my hand too early, Jason might try to scuttle the deal, burn the company down out of spite, or tie me up in litigation for years. He had the company credit card for legal fees I was paying out of pocket. I needed to wait until the moment of maximum leverage, the moment when backing out was impossible, the moment when the check was on the table and the pen was hovering. I looked at the calendar on my wall. The acquisition signing was scheduled for next Thursday. 6 days. 6 days to play the role of the defeated, compliant ex-employee. 6 days to let Jason dig his grave a little deeper. I took a sip of cold tea. It was bitter. I liked it. Tuesday, 2 days before the signing, Jason decided to host what he called a pre-victory board meeting. It wasn't a real board meeting, of course. Real board meetings require notice, agendas, and, crucially, me verifying the quorum. This was just a circle jerk in the conference room with the 3 lead VC investors who were about to cash out big time. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I was still technically employed for my transition period, and old habits die hard. Plus, the conference room has glass walls, and sound travels through the ventilation ducts remarkably well if you know where to stand in the copy room. But I didn't need the copy room. I walked right in. I was holding a tray of water bottles. It was humiliating, yes. A woman with a law degree and 15 years of governance experience playing waitress. But I needed to be in that room. I needed to hear the specific words they used. Marge, Jason said, his voice dripping with faux magnanimity when he saw me. He was wearing a suit today, no sneakers. He looked almost professional if you ignored the nervous energy radiating off him like heat waves. Just set those down, thanks. He turned back to the investors. 3 men in Patagonia vests and all-birds shoes, the uniform of capital. So Jason said, gesturing to the pitch deck on the screen. The cap table is clean. We've scrubbed the legacy issues. The option pool is optimized for the acquisition. Omnicorp is ready to wire the funds Thursday morning. And the founder's stock, one of the VCs asked, a guy named Brad. Richard's stake, Dad's on board. Jason waved a hand dismissively. He's in Florida. He just wants the check. He's not involved in ops anymore. I have his proxy. I thought as I set a water bottle down. Richard never gives proxies. He trusts no one in the redundancy, Brad asked, glancing briefly at me. He meant me. I was the redundancy. Handled, Jason said, his voice dropping a decibel. We offered a generous severance. The equity was retired. It's a non-issue. Retired. Like an old racehorse they shot behind the barn. I arranged the bottles perfectly straight. I checked the coasters. I was invisible. Excellent, Brad said, leaning back, because Omnicorp's legal team is brutal. If they find a single hair in the soup, they'll retrade the deal. They'll drop the valuation by 20% just for fun. There are no hairs, Jason insisted, slamming his hand on the mahogany table. We run a tight ship. We are transparent. We are ready. He picked up a bottle of sparkling water, the one I had just placed there. He raised it. To the finish line, Jason said, to the liquidity event the VCs chorused. They clinked plastic bottles. I stood by the door, holding the empty tray. My face was a mask of polite servitude. Inside, my brain was screaming. They were toasting to a crime. They were celebrating a heist where the getaway car had no engine. Jason looked at me. For a second, just a second. I saw a flicker of guilt, or maybe it was fear. Maybe he realized, deep down in his lizard brain, that it was too easy, that I had gone too quietly. You can go, Marjorie, he said. Enjoy the meeting, gentlemen, I said. I walked out. As I headed back to the annex, I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from Richard. Richard, Jason says you're leaving? What's going on? I stopped in the hallway. I looked at the text. I could tell him now. I could blow it up right now, but Richard was old. If I told him over the text, he might have a heart attack, or worse, he might call Jason and scream at him, tipping our hand. I typed back just a restructuring. Don't worry, Richard, I'm handling the paperwork. We'll see you Thursday. He replied, I'll be there for the signing. Hate these things. Need you to look over the final docs for me. I smiled. I'm already looking, Richard. I'm already looking. Pre-victory party was winding down upstairs. I could hear laughter. Let them laugh. Laughter makes you careless. Laughter makes you forget to check the basement. Wednesday, the day before the end of the world. The digital data room for a $400 million acquisition is a sacred space. It's a secure, encrypted server where the company bears its soul to the buyer. Every contract, every lawsuit, every employee agreement is uploaded for the buyer's lawyers to tear apart. I still had my admin credentials. Jason had instructed IT to revoke my access by Friday. He was sloppy. He should have done it Monday. I logged in from the annex. I watched the file uploads coming in from Jason's computer. Folder / cap table final / file, cap table v final clean XLSX. I downloaded it. I opened it. It was a work of fiction, a beautiful, terrifying lie. There it was, row 42, Marjorie X, shares 0. Status terminated / forfeited. He had actually done it. He hadn't just told me the options were canceled. He had deleted them from the official ledger presented to the buyer. This wasn't just shitty boss behavior anymore. This was federal securities fraud. This was go to jail, do not pass go territory. If Omnicorp bought the company based on this spreadsheet, and then I popped up later claiming 52% ownership, the lawsuit wouldn't just bankrupt the company. It would destroy Jason personally. It would destroy Richard's legacy. I stared at the spreadsheet. The cells were neatly formatted in Arial font. The lies looked so professional. My phone rang. It was a 212 number. Omnicorp's outside counsel, a firm known as the Wolfpack. I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. Then, a new notification popped up in the data room. Request from buyer counsel. Please provide original executed copies of all advisor agreements from 2010 to 2012. My breath hitched. They were digging. They were looking for the legacy paper. Jason uploaded a file 5 minutes later. File, advisor agreements consolidated PDF. I downloaded that too. I scrolled through it. He had included my original employment contract, but he had omitted the convertible advisory agreement, one with clause 7.2. He had cherry-picked the documents. He was actively concealing the controlling interest of the company. I leaned back in my chair. The hum of the servers sounded like a Gregorian chant. I had a choice. Option A, call the buyer's lawyers right now. Send them the missing document. Blow the deal before it gets to the table. Omnicorp walks away. The company's stock crashes. Jason gets fired, but the company and my potential payout burns to the ground. Option B, wait. Let Jason sign the representation that the data is accurate. Let him commit the fraud on paper in ink. Then intervene before the buyer countersigns. If I did option B, I wasn't just saving the company, I was taking it. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Richard? Marjorie? His voice was crackly, distant. He sounded tired. I'm at the airport, flying up for the signing tomorrow. Jason says it's a done deal. Why do I feel like I'm walking into a trap? Because you are, Richard, I said softly. What did he do? The edge was back in his voice, the old Richard. He erased me, Richard. He scrubbed the cap table. He's selling the company without disclosing the conversion clause. Silence on the line, then a heavy sigh that sounded like a tire deflating. The idiot, Richard muttered. The absolute, arrogance-blinded idiot. He thinks because he ignored the clause. Doesn't exist. He's going to sign the purchase agreement tomorrow, Richard. He's going to commit fraud. Not if we're in the room, Richard said. I need you to bring your copy, I said. The one from your safe, just in case. I have it, Richard said. I never travel without my insurance policy. Meet me in the lobby tomorrow, I said. 7:50 a.m. The signing is at 8 o'clock. Marjorie? Yes, take him down, but save the company. I built that damn thing with my own hands. I know, I said. That's why I'm still here. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now we just had to wait for the snap. Thursday morning, the day of reckoning. The weather was appropriate, thunderstorms. The sky over Manhattan was the color of a bruised plum. I stood in the lobby of our building, wearing my best suit, a navy blue power suit that cost a month's rent. I wasn't the governance lady today. I wasn't the annex ghost. I was the majority shareholder. Richard walked through the revolving doors at 7:50 a.m. sharp. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. He walked with a cane and his suit hung a little loose on his frame, but his eyes were still sharp. They were the eyes of a man who had stared down bankruptcy and won. Marjorie, he nodded. No hug. We weren't huggers. We were war buddies. Richard. I nodded back. You have the folio? He patted a battered leather briefcase. Right here. We took the elevator up. The silence was heavy. Does he know I'm coming with you? Richard asked. He thinks you're just here to smile for the photo op, I said. He thinks I'm packing my things. He never did understand the difference between price and value, Richard grunted. The elevator dinged at the penthouse floor. The glass doors slid open. The office had been transformed. Fresh flowers everywhere. Catering spread that could feed a small army. Champagne on ice. Jason was standing in the center of the room, adjusting his tie in the reflection of a window. When he saw Richard, he plastered on a smile. "Dad, you made it." He rushed over, ignoring the cane, ignoring the stiffness in Richard's gait. "Big day, biggest day." Then he saw me standing behind Richard. His smile faltered. "Marjorie, I thought you were clearing out the annex today." "I am," I said calmly. "Just wanted to say goodbye to your father." Jason checked his Rolex. "Okay, well, make it quick. The OmniCorp team is arriving in 10 minutes. We need the room clear of non-essentials, non-essentials." Richard gripped his cane tighter. I saw his knuckles turn white. He looked at his son, this boy he had raised, this boy he had handed a company to, and he saw the emptiness. "Jason," Richard said, his voice low. "Did you review the cap table with Marjorie?" "Dad, stop." Jason rolled his eyes. "It's handled. The lawyers signed off. Stop micromanaging. This is my deal. I built this value. You polished the value," Richard corrected. "You didn't build the foundation." Whatever, Jason waved a hand. "Just sit in the conference room. Don't say anything weird to the buyers, okay? Let me do the talking." He turned his back on us. He turned his back on his father. He walked toward the conference room where the lawyers were setting up. Richard looked at me, a look of profound sadness. "He's not ready," Richard whispered. "No," I said, "he's not." "Do what you have to do," Richard said. "Are you sure?" I asked. "He's your son." "He is," Richard said. "But the company? The company is my life's work, and he's about to perjure himself and destroy it." We walked toward the conference room. The OmniCorp team was walking in from the other entrance. 6 lawyers in charcoal suits, 2 partners. Serious men and women carrying thick binders. They looked like sharks entering a feeding frenzy. Jason greeted them with a high-five energy that was painfully out of place. "Welcome, welcome. Let's make history," Jason chirped. I stood by the door. I waited. The players were seated. The stage was set. It was time to flip the table. The conference room table was a slab of marble that probably cost more than my college education. On one side, Jason, flanked by our nervous-looking general counsel, a guy named Tim who was 26 and clearly out of his depth, and Richard. On the other side, the Wolfpack from OmniCorp. I stood in the back corner, near the ficus tree. Jason shot me a glare that clearly said get out, but he couldn't make a scene in front of the buyers. He ignored me, hoping I would dissolve. The lead counsel for OmniCorp, a woman with steel-gray hair and glasses that looked like they could cut glass, opened the main binder. Her name was Miss Sterling. "All right," Miss Sterling said. Her voice was crisp. "We've reviewed the final disclosures. We have the wire instructions queued. $400 million cash and stock deal." Jason was practically vibrating. He was already spending the money in his head. However, Miss Sterling paused. She pulled a single sheet of paper from her stack. "We have one final housekeeping item regarding the capitalization table." Jason froze. "Yes, it's clean. We sent the clean version. We ran a standard search against the Delaware corporate filings this morning," Miss Sterling said. "Just a sanity check, and we found a discrepancy." She slid the paper across the marble table. "There's a UCC filing and a historic shareholder agreement referenced in the 2012 audits that doesn't appear to be resolved in your current ledger." "A Class B convertible instrument?" Jason laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "Oh, that's ancient history. That was just some advisory thing for an old employee. It was canceled. Right, Tim?" He kicked Tim under the table. Tim jumped. Yes, retired, forfeited." Miss Sterling looked over her glasses. "Do you have the forfeiture agreement signed by the holder?" "We gave notice," Jason said. "It's an at-will employment state. We canceled the options." "Options are one thing," Miss Sterling said. "Voting stock is another. If this instrument converted, it's not an option anymore, it's equity. And if you don't have a signed release, we have a problem." The room went deadly silent. The air conditioning hummed. "Who is the holder?" Miss Sterling asked. She looked at the document. "Marjorie?" Jason's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. I took a step forward. My heels clicked on the hardwood floor. Click, click, click. Every head turned. "That would be me," I said. Jason swiveled around in his chair. His eyes were wide, panicked. "Marjorie, what are you doing? Get out." I ignored him. I walked straight to the table. I didn't look at Jason. I looked at Miss Sterling. "I am Marjorie," I said, "and I haven't signed a forfeiture agreement. In fact, I haven't signed anything." I placed my folio on the table. I opened it. "This," I said, pointing to the document, "is the original convertible advisory agreement. And here are the bank records showing 0 dividend payments for 12 years. And here are the affidavits swearing that no board meeting occurred between 2019 and 2022. I looked at Jason. "Clause 7.2 triggered on January 1st, 2022, I said. "My advisory shares converted to Class B supervoting stock." I turned back to Miss Sterling. "I don't hold options, Miss Sterling. I hold 52.4% of the voting interest in this company." The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear a pin drop. You could hear Jason's career dying. That's bullshit," Jason shouted, standing up. "She's a secretary. She's the governance lady. She doesn't own anything." "Sit down, Jason," Richard said. His voice was quiet, but it commanded the room. Jason looked at his father. "Dad, tell them." "She's telling the truth," Richard said. "She owns it, Jason. Always has." Miss Sterling looked from me to Jason to Richard. Then she closed her binder. "Well," she said, "it appears the person sitting in the CEO's chair doesn't actually have the authority to sell this company." She looked at me, a look of professional respect. Marjorie, she said, are you the controlling shareholder? I am, I said. Then why are we talking to him? She asked, gesturing vaguely at Jason. I have no idea, I said. I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the chair Jason usually sat in. Jason, I said, you're in my seat. Jason looked like he had been slapped. He looked around the room for allies. The VCs were staring at their phones, frantically texting their own lawyers. Tim, the general counsel, was trying to become one with his chair. Richard was staring straight ahead, his face unreadable. This is a coup, Jason sputtered. You can't just? This is my company. It was your playground, I corrected him. It's my company, legally. Technically and morally, I stood waiting. Jason, Richard said again, move. Jason stood up. He was shaking. He grabbed his portfolio. You'll hear from my lawyers. This is entrapment. This is corporate governance, I said. Goodbye, Jason. He stormed out. The heavy glass door swung shut behind him. The vibration rattled the water bottles. I sat down. The leather of the chair was still warm from him. I smoothed my skirt. I looked at the OmniCorp team. They were watching me like I was a bomb that had just diffused itself. Miss Sterling, I said, I apologize for the theatrics. The former management was confused about the equity structure. Clearly, Miss Sterling said. She looked amused. So where does this leave the deal? OmniCorp doesn't like surprises. No surprises, I said. I have reviewed the term sheet. The valuation is fair. The technology is sound. The only defect was the representation regarding the cap table. I slid a new document across the table. One I had drafted last night. This is a shareholder consent form. As the majority holder, I am ratifying the sale. I am approving the merger. Miss Sterling picked it up. She read it. And the proceeds? She asked. The distribution waterfall? The previous cap table allocated 40% to Jason, I said. That allocation is incorrect. My shares take precedence. I paused, however, I said. You're going to make one adjustment. The employee option pool, the one Jason tried to cancel, we're reinstating it out of my share. The engineers, the support staff, the people who actually built this place. They get their payout first. Richard looked at me. He smiled, a small, proud smile. And Jason? Miss Sterling asked. Jason remains a minority shareholder, I said. He will get his check, but he is removed from management, effective immediately. He is barred from the board of the new entity. Miss Sterling nodded. She pulled out a fountain pen. We can work with that, she said. For the next 4 hours, we redlined the contract. I didn't need Tim. I knew every clause, every liability, every buried skeleton in the company's history because I was the one who buried them. At 1:00 p.m., we signed. The wire transfer initiated. $400 million. My phone buzzed, a notification from the bank. I walked Richard to the elevator. You did good, Marge, he said. I just read the fine print, Richard, I said. He'll never forgive you, Richard said. He'll get over it in St. Tropez, I replied. With his 10% stake, he can buy a lot of therapy. I went back to the office. The annex seemed a million miles away. I walked into Jason's, no, my office. I looked at the view of the Manhattan skyline. The rain had stopped. The sun was breaking through the gray clouds. I saw the notice of equity forfeiture still sitting on the desk where Jason had left it on Friday. I picked it up. I walked over to the shredder. It was gone. I sat down in the Herman Miller chair. I adjusted the lumbar support. It finally fit. I opened my email. I sent one message to the entire company. Subject, update regarding leadership and acquisition to all staff from Marjorie X interim CEO team. The acquisition is complete. Your jobs are safe. Your stock options are vested. We are a family here. And this time, Mom is in charge. Get back to work. I closed my laptop. I took a sip of Jason's lukewarm sparkling water. It tasted like victory. Real power doesn't announce itself, it simply asserts. Marjorie's quiet takeover of that acquisition was a masterclass in strategy. Never mistake someone's silence for weakness. True competence often holds the ultimate leverage. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story. You know that specific sound a $3,000 ergonomic chair makes when it's struggling to support the weight of a man's unearned confidence? It's a low-frequency groan, like a dying whale or a collapsing moral compass. That was the soundtrack to my Tuesday morning. I was sitting in the Innovation Aquarium, a glass-walled conference room that smelled of ozone and dry erase marker fumes, watching a man named Grant dismantle 17 years of my life with a laser pointer and a smile that looked like it was practiced in a mirror while listening to Gary Vaynerchuk podcasts. I'm Jade. I don't exist on LinkedIn. My job title on my tax return says Logistics Consultant, which is the bureaucratic equivalent of a beige wall. In reality, I design the digital supply chain protocols that ensure Air Force One doesn't accidentally get refueled with sludge or fitted with parts sourced from a dubious warehouse in a non-extradition country. I deal in absolutes, redundancies, and paranoia. And this is Grant. Grant is the new director of Agile Operations. He wears loafers without socks, uses words like synergy unironically, and thinks security clearance is a vibe rather than a federal investigation. Grant was currently pointing at a diagram of my Tier 1 filtration system. This, he said, tapping the screen hard enough to leave a fingerprint that would drive me insane for the next hour, is what I call legacy drag. It's dinosaur code, people. We're moving at the speed of government, and I need us to move at the speed of now. I took a sip of my black coffee. It was lukewarm, much like my faith in humanity. By the way, if you enjoy reading about highly competent women watching confident idiots ruin everything, maybe hit subscribe and give this an upvote. It keeps the lights on in my bunker and fuels my caffeine addiction. Anyway, back to the disaster. Grant, I said, my voice level. I don't shout. Shouting is for people who don't know where the bodies are buried. That dinosaur code is a triple-blind handshake protocol. It verifies that the fuel trucks entering the perimeter actually belong to the Defense Department and aren't just disguised U-Hauls packed with fertilizer. Grant chuckled. It was a wet, dismissive sound. He turned to the room, a collection of terrified junior analysts and exhausted sysadmins who looked like they were waiting for a meteor strike to end the meeting. See, this is the fear-based mindset we're pivoting away from. Jade, I respect your tenure. I really do. But we're implementing a lean procurement model. Trust is our currency. Trust isn't a currency, I replied, feeling a migraine tightening its grip behind my left eye. Trust is a vulnerability. Verification is a currency. And if you remove that layer, you're not pivoting. You're opening a back door. He sighed, the way a parent sighs at a toddler who won't eat their organic broccoli. Jade, you're thinking in constraints. I'm thinking in possibilities. Private sector doesn't wait for 3 signatures to buy a spark plug. Why should we? Because the private sector isn't responsible for the aerial transport of the nuclear football, I said. It came out sharper than I intended, slicing through the air conditioning hum. The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the server racks in the basement, 3 floors down. Grant's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went dead. That's the thing about these corporate fixers, they don't have souls. They have KPIs. He didn't care about the nuclear football. He cared that my protocols added 45 minutes to his time-to-ship metric, and that was making his dashboard look red instead of green. We're going to table the nuclear talk, Jade. It's dramatic and, frankly, a bit toxic, Grant said, smoothing his tie. It was a hideous tie, a pattern of tiny sailboats that suggested he wished he was somewhere else. I wished he was somewhere else, too, preferably the bottom of the Mariana Trench. We are going to streamline the vendor list. We're going to automate the approval gates, and we are going to do it by Friday. He looked at me, expecting me to crumble or argue or throw a stapler. That's what he was used to, emotional pushback. He wasn't used to the silence of a predator watching prey wander into a minefield. I looked at his diagram. He had drawn a big red X over the section labeled Echo 0. It was the deep layer audit trail. It was the only thing that connected the physical inventory to the encrypted military database. Without it, we were just Amazon Prime with bigger guns. Friday, I repeated, you want to migrate a classified logistics mainframe to a lean model in 4 days. Agility, Jade. Adapt or die, he said, finger gunning at me. I wanted to break his finger. Instead, I set my coffee cup down with a precise, soft clink. Understood, I lied. I'll start preparing the documentation for the transition. I wasn't preparing documentation. I was preparing a funeral. Not for me, though he didn't know that yet, but for his entire career. I realized in that moment that Grant wasn't just a nuisance. He was a systemic error. And in my line of work, you don't argue with errors. You isolate them. You sandbox them. And then you let them execute their corrupted code until they crash the system in a controlled environment. But Grant wasn't in a sandbox. He was in the main control tower, and he had just threatened to turn off the safety lights because they were too bright. As the meeting dispersed, the junior analysts shuffled past me, eyes averted. They knew. They could smell the ozone of a burning career. Lena, a sharp kid from MIT who I'd been mentoring on encryption hygiene, paused by my chair. She pretended to organize her notes. He doesn't know what Echo 0 is, does he? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustle of papers. No, I whispered back, staring at the whiteboard where Grant had written disrupt in all caps. He thinks it's just a delay timer. Are you going to tell him? I looked at Lena. She was young. She still believed that if you explained things clearly enough, logic would prevail. She hadn't yet learned that for men like Grant, logic is just noise that interrupts the sound of their own voice. I told him, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. He called it toxic. Now we let the system tell him. I walked back to my desk, a corner office that was technically a converted server closet, but it was my server closet. It was the only room in the building with its own hardline connection to the sub-basement archives. I sat down and unlocked my workstation. The screen glowed with the comforting, brutalist aesthetic of a command line interface. No icons, no friendly UX, just raw data and the power to freeze a shipment of jet fuel in Alaska with a single keystroke. Grant wanted lean, he wanted fast, he wanted to strip away the dinosaur code. I cracked my knuckles. It's a bad habit, I know, my mother hates it, but it helps me think. I opened the master directory. I saw the file for Protocol 17B, the redundancy check for third-party vendors. Grant had already flagged it for deletion in the project management software. Okay, Grant, I muttered to the blinking cursor. You want to drive the car? Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize I took the brake pads with me. I didn't delete anything yet, I just organized. I moved my personal audit logs to a secure, partition drive that Grant didn't have clearance to see, mostly because he didn't know it existed. I archived the emails where he explicitly ordered the removal of safety checks. I created a digital paper trail so thick and heavy it could be used as a blunt weapon in a court of law. The air in the office felt different now. Thinner, sharper. It was the calm before the purge. I saw Grant walking around the floor, clapping people on the back, disrupting workflows, asking what are you working on, like a toddler interrupting a bomb defusal squad. He was marking his territory. He stopped at my desk. Jade, good energy in there today. I felt we really broke through some barriers. I looked up. We certainly broke something, Grant. He winked. He actually winked. That's the spirit. Break things fast. Fix them later. Fix them later, I echoed. Sure. He walked away, whistling. I watched him go. He was walking toward the server room. He didn't have a badge for the server room yet. He was going to bounce off the door. Thump, he bounced. He looked around annoyed, then tapped his phone, probably emailing HR to complain about the friction of locked doors. I turned back to my screen. I had work to do. If he was going to burn this place down, I needed to make sure I was standing in the only fireproof corner when the match dropped. The strategic silence had begun. I wouldn't argue anymore. I would just watch and wait. The dismantling didn't happen with a bang. It happened with a series of JIRA tickets. By Wednesday morning, Grant had unleashed what he called Operation Velocity. In practical terms, this meant stripping the flesh off the skeleton of our security infrastructure to make it run lighter. It was like watching a surgeon remove unnecessary organs, like the liver and the heart, because they weighed too much. My inbox was a graveyard of automated notifications. Access revoked, protocol disabled, user permission changed. I watched the screen as Protocol 9 Alpha went dark. That was the automated background check for delivery drivers entering the secure perimeter. Grant had replaced it with a streamlined vendor portal that was essentially a Google form with a smiley face at the end. He called it removing friction. I called it inviting the entire terrifying spectrum of the dark web to our loading dock. I walked to the break room to get coffee, mostly to avoid screaming into my keyboard. The mood in the bullpen was grim. People were typing furiously, heads down, avoiding eye contact. It felt less like a logistics center and more like the deck of the Titanic if the captain had announced that icebergs were just unscheduled hydration opportunities. Lena was by the water cooler, looking like she hadn't slept. She was clutching a tablet like a shield. He fired Jenkins, she whispered, staring into her paper cup. Jenkins, I blinked. Jenkins manages the cryo storage manifests. He's the only one who knows how to calibrate the temperature sensors for the medical payloads. Grant said Jenkins wasn't a culture fit, said he asked too many questions about compliance. Lena looked up at me, her eyes wide and terrified. Jade, he's giving Jenkins access to an intern, a marketing intern. He said we need fresh eyes on the cold chain. My stomach did a slow, cold roll. A marketing intern managing medical payloads for Air Force transports. That wasn't just negligence, that was biological warfare with extra steps. Keep your head down, Lena, I said, my voice low. Do exactly what he says. But email me a confirmation of every order he gives you. Blind copy me. Use the private server, not the exchange. He's revoked your admin rights on the procurement tier, Lena said, her voice trembling. I saw the ticket come through 10 minutes ago. He said you were blocking progress. I nodded. I expected that. It's fine. I don't need admin rights to see the crash coming. Just do as I say, document everything. I went back to my desk. I tried to log into the procurement tier, the system that orders parts for the planes. Access denied. Little red padlock icon shook at me. It was almost cute. Grant had locked the architect out of the house. But here's the thing about building a house. You know where the spare keys are hidden. You know about the loose floorboard in the hallway and the crawl space behind the pantry. I didn't try to hack back in. That would trigger an alert, and Grant was probably watching for that, desperate for a reason to march me out with security. Instead, I opened a terminal window that looked like nothing more than a system diagnostic tool. It was a legacy port, a ghost node, that I had hard-coded into the mainframe back in 2008 during a system migration. It wasn't an active control panel, it was a listening post. It couldn't change data, but it could see every single bit of data flowing through the veins of the facility. I ran a script, mirror log /silent /target, external drive E. While Grant was busy deleting safety latches, I was silently cloning the entire audit history of his actions. Every click, every override, every time he ignored a critical warning pop-up by clicking the little X in the corner. I was building a panoramic photograph of his stupidity in 4K resolution. Around 11 a.m., Grant strolled past my office. He stopped, leaning against the doorframe with that casual, lean-back arrogance that makes you want to throw a chair through a window. Jade, how's the documentation coming? He was holding a stress ball, squeezing it rhythmically. Squeak, squeak, it's coming, I said, not looking away from my scrolling lines of code. Noticed you streamlined the driver vetting process. Bold move. Boldness is the strategy, he beamed. We've already cut onboarding time by 60%. Vendors love it. We're getting high fives in the Slack channel. I'm sure the vendors love it, I said flatly. Especially the ones who have failed federal background checks in 3 states. They must be thrilled. Grant's smile tightened. You're stuck in the past, Jade. You see criminals, I see partners. We operate on trust now. Does the Secret Service operate on trust? I asked, finally turning to look at him. He waved a hand dismissively. This isn't the Secret Service. It's logistics. It's boxes moving from A to B. Don't overcomplicate it to justify your salary. That was the line. Don't overcomplicate it to justify your salary. I felt a cold calm wash over me. It was the feeling of a bridge burning, the structure finally giving way and falling into the river. I realized then that I wasn't just going to let him fail. I was going to help him reach the inevitable conclusion of his own philosophy. You're right, Grant, I said, forcing a thin, tight smile. Maybe I have been overthinking it. Boxes from A to B? Got it. He looked surprised, then pleased. He thought he'd broken me. He thought he'd won the dogfight. Glad you're on board. We're doing a town hall at 2 p.m. to announce the new Speed First initiative. I want you there, front row. Show the team we're aligned. I wouldn't miss it, I said. He left, squeaking down the hall. I turned back to my ghost node. The data was pouring in. The system was already bleeding. I could see the errors starting to tick up in the peripheral logs, tiny mismatches in weight manifests, routing numbers that didn't quite checksum correctly. The digital immune system of the facility was dying, cell by cell. I pulled a small, encrypted hard drive from my bag and plugged it in. The backup completed. 100%. I had the evidence. Now I just needed the crime. And looking at the way Grant was tearing down the fences around the lion's den, I knew the crime wasn't far off. I checked my phone. A text from an old contact at the Pentagon, a colonel I'd worked with during the Iraq drawdown, hearing noise about a reorg over there. You good? I stared at the message. I typed back, define good. The monkeys have the keys to the zoo. Keep your phone on. I put the phone away. I could feel the hum of the servers beneath my feet, a vibration I had lived with for nearly 2 decades. It felt like a heartbeat. And for the first time in 17 years, the heartbeat was irregular, arrhythmic. The purge was almost complete. The system was wide open. Grant had removed the constraints. He had no idea that those constraints were the only thing keeping gravity in check. The disaster arrived on a Thursday, wrapped in a deceptively simple shipping manifest. I was in the break room, staring at the microwave as it nuked a sad Tupperware of leftover risotto, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It wasn't a text. It was a haptic alert pattern I had programmed 5 years ago. Long, short, priority 1 anomaly. I left the risotto spinning. I walked back to my office, not running, but moving with the kinetic purpose of a paramedic approaching a car wreck. I slid into my chair and woke the ghost node. There it was. A flashing line of red text amidst the green waterfall of data. Alert. Unverified source detected in Stream AF1OX Logistics. Payload, Avionics Component Class 4, Origin. Shenzhen via Shell Corp 77, override authorized by Admin Grant. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a metaphor. I literally felt the temperature of my blood drop. Grant had authorized a shipment of Class 4 avionics critical navigation chips from a vendor that was flagged in our system as a Shell Corp 77. In layman's terms, that means it's a front company. Likely foreign intelligence, possibly just black market trash, but definitely not the vetted, secure supply chain required for the aircraft that carries the President of the United States. He had bypassed the filter. The dinosaur code he hated so much was actually a geofence designed to stop exactly this. He had manually forced the gate open. I took a screenshot, then another. I saved them to the encrypted drive, then I stood up. This wasn't about office politics anymore. This was treason adjacent. It was negligence on a scale that lands you in a federal supermax, not just the unemployment line. I walked straight to Grant's office. I didn't knock. Grant was on a video call, feet up on his desk, laughing at something on the screen. When I walked in, he looked annoyed. He held up a finger, signaling me to wait. I didn't wait. I walked over to his desk and tapped end call on his monitor. Hey. He dropped his feet to the floor, face flushing red. I was on with the VP of Operations. What the hell is your problem, Jade? My problem, I said, my voice quiet and deadly terrifying, is that you just authorized a shipment of navigation chips from a blacklisted supplier in Shenzhen directly into the Air Force One maintenance queue. Grant rolled his eyes so hard I thought they'd detach. Oh my God, Jade, are we doing this again? I approved a component sourcing request. Vendor offered a 40% cost reduction and guaranteed 2-day delivery. That's called efficiency. That's called a national security breach, I said, leaning over his desk, my palms flat on the fake mahogany. That vendor is flagged for a reason. Their hardware is known to contain backdoor surveillance firmware. You are literally inviting a foreign power to listen in on the president's navigation data. You're paranoid, he spat, standing up to try and match my height. He failed. You see spies in every circuit board. I vetted them. They have a website. They have a 5-star rating on the vendor portal I built. A 5-star rating, I repeated, incredulous. You're basing national security on a Yelp review? I'm basing it on speed, Jade, something you clearly don't understand. He was shouting now, his neck veins bulging against his collar. I am the director. I authorized the override. It is done. The shipment is already en route. Recall it, I said. Cancel the order. Flag the shipment for quarantine. Do it now, Grant. No, he said, crossing his arms. I'm not going to look like an indecisive idiot in front of the VP because you have a boogaman fetish. The shipment proceeds. And frankly, Jade, your attitude is becoming a major blocker to our velocity. I stared at him. I really looked at him. I saw the fear behind the arrogance. He knew deep down that he didn't know what he was doing. But his ego was steering the bus, and he'd rather drive off a cliff than ask for directions. Grant, I said, and my voice changed. The anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, formal detachment. This was the moment I stopped being his employee and started being a witness for the prosecution. I need you to state for the record that you are consciously overriding the trace flag on stream AF1AUX despite a direct warning from the senior security engineer regarding the origin of these components. He scoffed. Don't liar me, Jade. Yes, I authorize it. I am overriding your outdated paranoid filter. Consider this a direct order to stand down. Is that a formal instruction? Yes, stand down. In fact, he paused, a cruel glint in his eye. Maybe you need some time to think about whether you fit in this new organization. Maybe your role is being, what's the word? Sunsetted. I stood up straight. I adjusted my blazer. Understood, I said. You're sunsetting the security protocols, and you're overriding the safety filters for the presidential fleet. I'm modernizing logistics, he corrected. Now get out of my office. I turned and walked out. I didn't go back to my desk to cry. I didn't go to HR to complain. I went to the server room door. My badge still worked for now. I walked into the cold, humming aisle of the data center. I found the specific rack that handled the physical logging of system alerts. I wasn't there to sabotage. I was there to ensure the black box was recording. I checked the status lights. Green, recording. Grant had just signed his name to a disaster. He thought he was moving fast and breaking things. He didn't realize that the thing he had just broken was the only thing standing between him and a military tribunal. I walked back to my desk. I felt light, weightless. The responsibility was gone. I had warned him. I had documented the warning. I had confirmed his refusal. The line had been crossed. Now, all I had to do was step out of the blast radius. Resignation letters are usually drafted with a mix of regret and diplomacy. Mine was drafted with the precision of a sniper adjusting for windage. 2. Grant, Director of Agile Operations, HR Department. From Jade Rivera subject. Immediate resignation/transfer of authority effective immediately. I am resigning from my position as Senior Security Protocol Engineer. Per your verbal instruction at 11:42 a.m. today, I am standing down and ceasing all oversight of the logistics streams. All liability for system overrides authorized by the director now resides solely with the director's office. I didn't add sincerely. I didn't add best wishes. I hit send. The sound of the email swooshing away was better than any symphony I'd ever heard. I started packing my box. Not a lot to pack after 17 years. A framed photo of my dog, who had more clearance than Grant. A coffee mug that said I am the error handler, and a small cactus that had survived 3 administration changes. I left the binders, I left the manuals, I left the sticky notes with the non-critical passwords, but I kept the badge, not the physical plastic card. I'd have to hand that in. I kept the digital badge. Years ago, I had created a system auditor profile. It wasn't an admin account. It couldn't change settings or stop a shipment. It was a read-only account designed for external audits. It was invisible to the standard user directory because it was hard-coded into the kernel level of the operating system. As long as the servers had power, the auditor account existed, and I had the private key memorized. Lena appeared at my cubicle wall, her face pale. Jade, I saw the email. You can't leave. The system is? It's acting weird. The inventory counts are flickering. I have to leave, Lena, I said, placing the cactus gently in the box. If I stay, I'm complicit. If I stay, I'm the one they blame when the plane falls out of the sky. But what do I do? Tears were welling up in her eyes. Grant keeps approving things. He just turned off the hazardous material conflicting check because it was slowing down the trucks. I stopped and looked at her. She was a good kid. She didn't deserve this. Listen to me closely, I said, lowering my voice. Do not sign anything. Do not authorize anything with your own credentials. If he orders you to do it, tell him you don't have access and make him do it on his terminal. Make him leave his fingerprints on the murder weapon. She nodded, sniffing. Okay, but who's going to fix the green layer? I smiled. It was a sad smile. Nobody is going to fix the green layer, Lena, because Grant doesn't know it exists. What happens when it desynchronizes? Then the building goes into lockdown and the adults show up, I said, just. Make sure you're not in the loading bay when the shutters come down. It gets loud. I picked up my box. Grant came out of his office holding a printout of my resignation email. He looked triumphant. He looked like he had just slain the dragon. Well, he said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. I see you decided to embrace the change. Probably for the best, Jade. We need people who are all in on the vision. The vision is crystal clear, Grant, I said. I need your badge and your keys, he said, holding out a hand. I dropped my plastic keycard into his palm. All yours, you have full control now. The safety wheels are off. Finally, he breathed, pocketing the card. Now we can really move. Just one piece of advice, Grant, I said, shifting the box to my hip. Watch the green layer filters. If they start blinking, don't just clear the cache. Green layer, he scoffed. More made-up jargon. I'll have IT purge the old scripts by Monday. We're moving to the cloud. Right? The cloud, I said. Good luck with that. I walked to the elevator. I could feel the eyes of the entire office on my back. Some were terrified, some were confused, but mostly they were silent. They knew the dampener was leaving the reactor core. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of Grant standing in the middle of the floor, arms akimbo, looking like the king of a kingdom built on quicksand. I walked out to the parking lot. The Colorado sun was bright and blinding. The air smelled of pine and ozone. I walked to my car, a sensible Subaru, and put the box in the passenger seat. I sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I expected to feel panic. I expected to feel the urge to run back in and save them. But I didn't. I felt the grim satisfaction of a structural engineer who sees cracks in the foundation, warns the owner, gets fired, and then watches from a safe distance as gravity does its work. I started the car. System, I said to the empty car. Initiate drive home. I wasn't driving away from a job. I was driving away from a crime scene before the bodies had even hit the floor. As I pulled out of the lot, I glanced at the building one last time. It looked peaceful, solid, but I knew better. Inside those walls, a clock was ticking. A clock I had wound, and a clock Grant had just stripped the gears off of. I gave it 48 hours, maybe less. The first 24 hours of retirement were strange. I cleaned my gutters, I walked the dog. I drank expensive scotch on my porch, but my phone was never far away. It started with a text from Lena at 10:45 a.m. on Friday. Hey, the inventory system is auto-tagging jet fuel as potable water. Grant says it's a UI glitch and to just put a sticky note on the tanks. Is that normal? I stared at the screen. Jet fuel tagged as drinking water. In a combat zone or a disaster relief mission, that mistake kills people. It poisons a village or stalls a generator in a medevac tent. I didn't reply. I couldn't. If I replied, I was consulting, and Grant could claim I gave bad advice. I poured another coffee and watched a hawk circle over the tree line. 2 hours later, another text. The secure doors in Sector 4 keep opening and closing on their own. It's freaking everyone out. Grant had maintenance cut the power to the motors. Now they're just propped open with wooden wedges. Wooden wedges holding open the blast doors to the secure server farm. I laughed. A dry, harsh bark of a laugh. It was perfect. The agile approach literally meant using a doorstop to bypass millions of dollars in physical security. By Friday afternoon, the silence from the facility was louder than the texts. Grant had likely issued a gag order. Don't talk to the crazy ex-employee. I went into my home office and logged into the audit node. I wasn't touching the system, just looking through the keyhole. The dashboard was a sea of yellow warnings. Warning, logic mismatch. Tier 3. Warning, invalid certificate. Vendor, unknown. Warning, dependency failure. Protocol Jade legacy not found. System was looking for me. The code I had written over a decade was designed to check in with a master authorization key, my specific user profile, every 48 hours for high-level changes. It was a dead man's switch for integrity. If my profile was deleted or inactive, the system assumed the facility had been compromised or that the chain of command was broken. Grant had deleted my active user profile. The system was now asking, where is the adult? Getting no answer. I saw a query running in the internal video archives. Someone was searching for Jade Rivera training and green layer explanation. It was Lena. She was digging. She found an old video from 2014. I could see the playback log. In the video, I was younger, less tired, explaining the green layer logic to a room of generals. The green layer, video Jade said, is the silent arbiter. It sits between the civilian supply chain and the military execution. It doesn't care about cost. It doesn't care about speed. It only cares about provenance. If a part cannot be traced back to the mine where the metal was dug, the green layer rejects it. If you try to force it, the green layer assumes a hostile takeover and initiates a defensive lockdown. I watched the log as the video ended. Then, a new log entry appeared. Action, disable green layer script user. Admin Grant, he was trying to kill the ghost. Lena must have showed him the video or he found it and his reaction wasn't, oh, I should be careful. It was delete the thing that says no. He entered the command to delete the script. But here's the thing about the green layer. You can't delete it from the user interface. It's kernel level. When you try to delete it, it interprets that action as a specific type of threat, insider sabotage. Warnings on my screen changed from yellow to orange. Threat detected, unauthorized system deletion attempt. Status monitoring. Escalation timer started. Grant had just poked the bear. He didn't know the bear was awake. He thought he was just clearing out old files to make his dashboard look cleaner. My phone buzzed again. Lena. He tried to delete the green layer files. The screens flashed orange for a second. He's laughing about it, says he purged the ghosts. Jade. I'm scared. The air conditioning just stopped in the server room. The AC stopping wasn't a glitch. It was the first stage of the lockdown protocol. The system was sealing the environment to prevent thermal spread in case the sabotage involved fire. I finally typed a reply. Go home, Lena. Tell them you're sick. Leave the building. Now. I watched the dot of her typing. Then it stopped. 10 minutes later, I saw her badge swipe at the exit turnstile. Lena M. exit 16, 15. Good, she was safe. Now it was just Grant, his team of agile yes men, and a logic bomb that had been ticking for 17 years, waiting for someone stupid enough to cut the red wire. I sat back in my chair. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my desk. The orange warning light on my remote screen pulsed rhythmically. It matched my heartbeat. The internal fracture was complete. The structure was compromised. Now came the collapse. Saturday morning was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that precedes a tornado. I woke up early, made coffee, and immediately checked the audit node. The orange warnings had settled into a steady, low-level burn, like embers in a wall. The system was holding its breath, waiting for the next violation to confirm its suspicions. Grant, in his infinite wisdom, decided that Saturday was the perfect day to clear the backlog of blocked shipments. He wanted to start Monday with a clean slate. He wanted to show the VP that his speed-first initiative had eliminated the queue. At 09:00 a.m., the logs showed activity. Grant was logging in from home, of course, bypassing the secure VPN, of course, and batch-approving held items. Click, approve, click, approve, click, approve. He was rubber-stamping logistics orders like he was liking posts on Instagram. Then, at 09:14 a.m., he hit the tripwire. The shipment from Shell Corp 77, the one with the navigation chips I had explicitly warned him about, had been flagged by the green layer as quarantined. It was sitting in a digital cage, isolated from the main supply chain. Grant saw the cage. He saw the quarantined label, and in his mind, that label was just another bureaucratic hurdle. Action, manual override quarantine user. Admin grant justification. Expedited delivery / vendor trusted. I watched the command execute on my screen. I stopped breathing for a second. He didn't just unlock the gate. He forced the system to inject the corrupted data, the manifests for the spy chips, directly into the Tier Echo 0 database. This is the database that Air Force One's maintenance crews used to verify parts. If those chips got installed, the plane wouldn't just be compromised, it would be a flying listening post for a foreign adversary. The system reacted instantly. The diagnostic text on my screen vanished. The scrolling green and orange lines disappeared. The screen went black. Then a single line of text appeared, blinking in stark white. Protocol violation confirmed, Tier Echo 0 breach. Source, internal admin. Response, DEFCON logistics automation. Awaiting timeout. System wasn't whispering anymore. It was racking a shotgun slide. My phone buzzed. It was an automated alert from the facility's main server, one that Grant couldn't disable because he didn't know the IP address. Subject, green layer is glitching, help? It wasn't the system. It was Lena, emailing me from her personal account at home. She must have still been getting notifications on her phone. Jade, I'm getting alerts that the main warehouse robots have stopped moving. The inventory screens are all showing a countdown. It says 15:00. What happens at 3 p.m.? I looked at the clock. It was 9:30 a.m. The system had initiated a grace period. It was giving the authorized users 6 hours to reverse the command to enter a rigorous cryptographic key that proved they were sane, sober, and authorized. Grant didn't have that key. I had that key. And I was sitting on my porch watching a hummingbird. I didn't reply to Lena. I deleted the email. It was cleaner that way. I went back to the audit node. I could see Grant's activity log. He was frantically clicking now. Command. Reset system denied command. Clear alerts denied command. Pseudo force unlock access violation. He was realizing that the steering wheel had disconnected from the tires. He was spinning it wildly, but the car was driving itself now. I imagined him in his home office, probably spilling his kale smoothie. He would be calling IT support, but IT support couldn't help him. The green layer wasn't an IT issue. It was a military doctrine encoded in C++. The countdown ticked on. 10 o'clock a.m., 12 o'clock p.m., 2 o'clock p.m. At 2:45 p.m., I poured a glass of water. I sat down in front of my screens. I pulled up the external camera feeds for the facility parking lot. I hacked into them years ago for security monitoring. I saw cars in the lot, the weekend crew, some poor logistics coordinators trying to figure out why their screens were frozen. At 2:55 p.m., the audit node displayed a new message. Grace period expired. No valid key detected. Assuming hostile takeover. Executing lockdown. The whispers were over. The screen was about to start. At 3 o'clock p.m. exactly, the facility ceased to be a corporate logistics center and remembered what it was built to be, a fortress. On my screen, the timestamp hit 15:00:00. Instantaneously, the green layer executed its final logic block, conditional lockdown, breach level 3. I switched the feed to the interior cameras, the ones in the main hallway and the server room. There was no audio, but the visual was chaotic poetry. First, the lights. The standard fluorescent overheads cut out instantly. The building plunged into darkness for exactly 2 seconds. Then the emergency lighting kicked in. Not the soft white safety lights you see in office buildings. These were deep, throbbing red strobes designed to disorient intruders and signal catastrophic failure. Flash, dark, flash, dark. In the hallway, I saw employees freeze. They looked up, confused. Then the blast shutters descended. These weren't flimsy security grates. They were 2-inch thick steel plates recessed into the ceiling, designed to isolate the facility in case of a chemical attack or a physical breach. They slammed down over the main entrance, the loading docks, and the windows. Clang. I could almost feel the vibration through the monitor. The open office concept was suddenly partitioned into steel cells. I checked the server room camera. The door, the one Grant had propped open with a wooden wedge, was the only failure point. The blast shutter tried to descend but hit the wedge. It jammed halfway, but the system was redundant. Seeing the physical seal fail, it initiated the secondary protocol, data severance. Every computer terminal in the building went black. Then, a single image appeared on every monitor, from the receptionist's iPad to the massive dashboard screen in the war room. It was the Department of Defense seal, rotating slowly. Below it, in harsh block letters, unauthorized incursion detected. Jurisdiction transferred to USAF command. Remain in place. Grant was in the facility. He must have driven in when the system stopped responding remotely. I found him on camera standing in the middle of the bullpen. He was screaming into his cell phone. I checked the cellular spectrum analyzer on my ghost node. Signal jamming, active. His phone was a brick. Facility had engaged a local Faraday cage protocol. No signals in, no signals out, except for one hardline, the one connecting the facility to the Pentagon. Grant looked at his phone, tapped it furiously, then threw it across the room. It skittered across the floor and hit the shoe of a terrified intern. He ran to the main exit. He pushed the push bar. Locked. He slammed his shoulder against it, solid steel. He was trapped in the cage he had built, with the people he had terrorized under the red strobes of the system he had mocked. I watched him panic. It wasn't the funny kind of panic. It was the primal fear of a man realizing he is no longer the predator. He was banging on the glass of the reception booth, which was also sealed, mouthing words. I could lip read enough to catch them. Open the door, I am the director. The system didn't care about his title. The system only cared about the cryptographic signature he didn't have. On my audit node, the final confirmation rolled in, perimeter secure. External notification sent, USAF Space Command/Joint Chiefs. Reason, Tier Echo 0 integrity compromised. The text turned from white to a steady, calm blue, awaiting military intervention. I sat back and took a sip of my water. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear but from the adrenaline of the execute command. It was done. The bomb hadn't just gone off. It had successfully imploded the building's operational capacity without hurting a single person physically. Career-wise, there were casualties everywhere. I checked the external camera again. In the distance, coming up the long access road, I saw the flashing lights, not police cars, black subs, military police. The cavalry wasn't coming to save Grant, they were coming to arrest him. I closed the laptop lid. I didn't need to see the rest, I knew the protocol. It would breach the perimeter, secure the servers, and detain the senior officer on site. That was Grant. I walked into my kitchen and started making dinner, chopping vegetables. The rhythmic chop, chop, chop of the knife replaced the clunk, clunk, clunk of the blast doors in my head. I had salted the earth. Now, I just had to wait for the soil to be tested. I didn't witness the next part live, but I heard the recording later. It became part of the official inquest. A digital artifact passed around the secure engineer community like a bootleg concert tape. It happened inside the war room, Grant's renamed conference room, about 45 minutes after the lockdown. The military police had breached the side entrance, cutting through the maglocks with thermal torches. They swarmed the building, zip-tying everyone until identities could be verified. Grant was dragged into the conference room, sweating, tie undone, demanding to speak to whoever is in charge of this glitch. The main screen in the room, which had been displaying the spinning DoD seal, suddenly flickered. The seal vanished. In its place was a high-definition video feed. General Marcus Thorne, 4 stars, Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force. I knew Thorne. We had shared MREs in a bunker in 2009 while debugging a satellite uplink. He was a man who smiled once a decade, usually when a hostile regime collapsed. He wasn't smiling now. Grant, still trying to muster some authority despite being flanked by 2 MPs with carbines, straightened his jacket. General, Grant stammered, "Thank God, there's been a massive malfunction." "My systems are," "Be quiet," Thorne said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It had the weight of an aircraft carrier. The audio quality in the room was crystal clear. Grant's mouth snapped shut. "Mr. Grant," Thorne continued, reading from a file on his desk. "At 09:14 hours, your credentials were used to override a level 5 quarantine on a supply stream designated for presidential support logistics. Is this accurate?" I expedited a shipment," Grant said, his voice rising in pitch. It was a lean optimization. The vendor was vetted via our portal. I have the metrics to prove the vendor, Thorne interrupted, is a known front for the Ministry of State Security. You attempted to install tracking hardware on Air Force One. Do you understand the definition of treason, Mr. Grant? Grant went pale. Treason? No, I'm a civilian contractor. I was just streamlining. You bypassed the green layer, Thorne said. Why? It was dinosaur code. Grant yelled, desperate now. It was blocking efficiency. I had to remove the legacy drag. Thorne stared at him for a long, uncomfortable silence. That dinosaur code was written by the lead architect of our secure logistics integration, Jade Rivera. Grant blinked. Jade? She's just a paranoid obstructionist. I fired her. You removed the only qualified engineer with the clearance to manage the Echo Zero tier, Thorne said. And in doing so, you triggered a dormant defense protocol designed to prevent exactly this kind of incompetence. Thorne leaned into the camera. Who authorized you to override the protocols of a national security asset? The mandate was agility, Grant whispered. The mandate, Thorne said, was security. You have failed. Thorne looked away from the camera, addressing someone off-screen. Take him into custody. Secure the facility. Initiate a full forensic audit. Wait, Grant screamed as the MPs grabbed his arms. I can fix it. I just need to reboot the server. You will not touch a keyboard again as long as you live, Thorne said. Then the general looked back at the camera. He seemed to be looking through the lens, through the fiber optics, straight into the ether where he knew I was listening. Get me Rivera, he said. The screen went black. Back at my house, my phone rang. It wasn't the haptic alert. It was a standard ringtone. Caller ID unknown. I picked up. This is Jade. Jade, a colonel's voice said. General Thorne sends his regards. We have a situation at the facility. I heard, I said. Stirring my pasta sauce. Sounds like a glitch. It's not a glitch and you know it. The system is locked down hard. We can't get into the mainframe. The encryption keys rotated when the lockdown hit. Sounds like the green layer doing its job, I said. Jade, the colonel sighed. Grant is in cuffs. The contract with his firm is terminated effective immediately. We need the facility back online. The president has a schedule. That sounds like a complex problem, Colonel. What do you want, Jade? I paused. I looked at my kitchen at the peace and quiet I had fought for. I want a new contract, I said, direct with the duty. No civilian middlemen, no directors of agility. I report to the Pentagon and I run the protocols my way. And I want it in writing, signed by Thorne before I even put my shoes on. There was a pause on the other end. Done, the colonel said. A car is on its way to you. Tell them to wait, I said. I'm eating dinner. I hung up. I sat down at my table and ate my pasta. It was perfectly cooked, al dente, just the way I like it. I returned to the facility on Tuesday. I took Monday off because, frankly, I could. I didn't drive my Subaru. I arrived in the back of a government sedan, escorted by two very polite officers who opened the door for me. The parking lot was different. The Agile Operations banner that Grant had hung over the entrance was gone, replaced by the standard U.S. Air Force logistics flag. The vibe wasn't startup energy anymore, it was solemn duty. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a terrified young woman named Sarah, looked up. When she saw me, her shoulders visibly dropped 3 inches. Relief. Welcome back, Miss Rivera, she whispered. I nodded. Good morning, Sarah. I walked through the bullpen. The open plan office was quiet. No music, no Nerf guns. Just the sound of typing and serious conversations. The collaboration pods were being dismantled by maintenance crews. Grant's office, the glass fishbowl, was empty. His ergonomic chair was gone. His whiteboard, which had said disrupt, was wiped clean. It was just a glass box now. I didn't go in there. I didn't want his office. I walked to my server closet. My cactus was still in the box on my desk where I had left it, but someone, Lena, probably had watered it. Lena was waiting for me. She looked like she had aged 5 years and 3 days. Jade, she said, standing up, is it? Is it over? The disruption is over, I said, putting my bag down. How's the team shaken, she said. HR is doing interviews. The FBI seized Grant's laptop. They found a lot of overrides. I imagine they did. The colonel walked in. He was a tall man with a haircut you could set a watch to. Miss Rivera, he said. The general is waiting for the all-clear signal. I need access to the console, I said. He nodded and handed me a new badge. It didn't say consultant. It said Director of Protocol Ops Clearance, Yankee White. I took the badge. It felt heavy. I walked to the main terminal in the center of the room. The screen still showed the blue awaiting military intervention status. I typed in my credentials. User, Jade R. password. The system hesitated for a millisecond, checking the biometrics of my typing cadence. It recognized the dinosaur. Welcome back, architect. Restore from backup? Y/NI typed Y. The red lights in the ceiling stopped flashing. The blast shutters groaned and began to lift, letting the Colorado sunlight flood back into the room. The air conditioning hummed to life, changing from the emergency cycle to the standard cooling flow. The screens around the room flickered and returned to their familiar green dashboards. Green Layer was back online, silent and invisible, wrapping its protective arms around the supply chain. We are green across the board, I said to the colonel. Good work, Director, he said. Try to keep the drama to a minimum this time. As long as the chain of command stays vertical, there won't be any drama, I replied. He walked away. I sat in my chair, my old, comfortable, non-ergonomic chair. I looked at the code scrolling on my screen. It was complex, dense, and redundant. It was slow. It was safe. Grant was gone, likely facing a federal judge who didn't care about his velocity. His career was a crater. His reputation was ash. I had won. But as I looked around the room, at the scared faces of the analysts, at the empty glass office, I didn't feel happy. I felt necessary. I was the wall, and walls don't have feelings, they just hold the roof up. I pulled up a new terminal window. Update protocol, no civilian override. Set permission, Jade only. I hit enter. System, I whispered, lock the gate. Click, we were safe again, and this time I had the only key. Real power doesn't announce itself. It simply exists, waiting for incompetence to expose itself. Jade knew her robust protocols would speak volumes when Grant's arrogance triggered the inevitable shutdown. True authority isn't about titles, but the quiet, undeniable strength of expertise that demands respect. Appreciate you all for sticking through this one. See you in the next story.